A racist cop strikes Keanu Reeves with a baton, but what happens next will leave you speechless. Keanu, known for his kindness and calm demeanor, doesn't back down. Instead, he teaches the officer a powerful lesson that will change everything. Stay tuned as we dive into this unforgettable encounter. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The park buzzed with life on a warm afternoon. Birds chirped, children laughed, joggers rhythmically pounded the pavement. Amid the activity sat Keanu Reeves, casually perched on a bench, savoring a rare moment of solitude. Wearing a hoodie and dark sunglasses, Keanu blended effortlessly with the crowd. He wasn't seeking attention, just a little peace after an exhausting schedule. Officer Kane strolled through the park with a commanding presence. His gait oozed an inflated sense of authority, teetering on arrogance. Known for targeting anyone who didn't fit his rigid standards of belonging, Kane was infamous in the area, and he reveled in the control his badge gave him. As his sharp eyes scanned the scene, they locked onto Keanu, sitting quietly on the bench, entirely unbothered. Kane's biases ignited instantly, his assumptions feeding a misguided sense of righteousness. The tension was evident in Kane's grip on his baton, as his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Muttering under his breath, he sneered, "What's a guy like that doing here, dressed like that?" To Kane, Keanu's casual hoodie and sunglasses seemed suspicious, out of place on such a picturesque day. In his mind, anyone not actively jogging, picnicking, or otherwise contributing to the park atmosphere was automatically suspect. As he marched toward Keanu, his boots crunching the gravel with each purposeful step, his demeanor grew heavier with the weight of his authority. Without so much as an introduction, Kane barked out a command that shattered the calm. "Hey, you! What are you doing here? You can't just sit around." Startled, Keanu glanced up, his peaceful mood replaced by a flicker of irritation. Lowering his sunglasses deliberately, he revealed sharp, intense eyes, an unmistakable mix of wisdom and quiet strength. The tension in the air was suffocating, every second stretching unbearably as Keanu's gaze bore into Kane. His voice, calm yet carrying an unmissable edge, broke the oppressive silence. "You've made a mistake," he said, his tone as steady as the ground beneath him, but layered with a quiet authority that sent a ripple of unease through the crowd gathering at a distance. Officer Kane, his arrogance masking any sense of self-preservation, scoffed. "Mistake?" he spat, his sneer widening. "The only mistake here is thinking you can defy me." His baton hovered menacingly in the air, an extension of his desperate need to assert dominance. The officer's bravado, however, faltered for the briefest of moments as Keanu stepped forward, each movement deliberate, each step a silent declaration of control. "I'm not resisting," Keanu stated, his voice even, yet carrying a gravity that seemed to resonate beyond the words themselves. His hands remained at his sides, his stance calm, yet exuding a raw power that could not be ignored. "But you might want to think carefully about your next move." The crowd had grown, murmurs of disbelief and outrage rippling through the onlookers. Phones were pointed in Kane's direction, the cold, unblinking lenses capturing every second of his unraveling. The officer, feeling the weight of the watchful eyes around him, but too consumed by his anger to retreat, tightened his grip on the baton, his knuckles ghostly white. "You're pushing your luck," Kane growled, his voice low, threatening. Keanu's response was a faint, knowing smile, one that barely touched his lips but spoke volumes. It was the kind of smile that carried the weight of experience, a deep understanding of battles fought and won. "I'm just standing my ground," he said, the words simple but cutting, spoken with the kind of restraint that hinted at the storm waiting beneath the surface. And then, with a speed that was almost imperceptible, Kane lunged, his baton swinging toward Keanu in a reckless arc. But Keanu was ready. With a grace and precision that left the crowd breathless, he sidestepped the blow, his movements fluid and unhurried. Kane stumbled, thrown off balance by his own aggression. Before he could regain his footing, Keanu reached out, his hand closing around the baton with a strength that stopped Kane in his tracks. The two men locked eyes, Kane's filled with panic and frustration, Keanu's calm, yet blazing with a warning that words could never convey. "Enough," Keanu said, his voice low, but carrying a resonance that silenced even the whispers in the crowd. His grip on the baton loosened, and he let it fall to the ground with a muted thud. The park seemed to hold its breath, the stillness broken only by the sound of Kane's labored breathing. And then, slowly, Keanu turned to face the crowd. "We all saw that," he said, his voice carrying across the space, measured and commanding. "Make sure the truth comes out." As Keanu began to walk away, his figure tall and unyielding, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, their phones still recording. Kane stood frozen, his authority shattered, his bravado reduced to rubble in the wake of a man who had refused to yield. The balance of power had shifted, and the world was watching. Keanu's words were razor-sharp, each syllable slicing through the thick tension. His voice, steady and measured, carried a warning that chilled to the bone. "Big mistake," he said, his tone low but crackling with restrained power. His composure had shifted into something colder, more focused, a calculated readiness that sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. His fists tightened at his sides, the veins on his forearms standing out as his muscles coiled with anticipation. Kane, oblivious to the danger looming before him, smirked with the arrogance of someone too confident in their own authority. His sneer twisted his face into an almost cartoonish mask of contempt. "Oh yeah? What are you gonna do about it, tough guy?" Kane jeered, his words dripping with mockery. Keanu remained silent, his stare unwavering, his stillness speaking louder than words. The air between them seemed to hum with electricity, a tangible tension that froze the crowd in place. As he took a single deliberate step forward, the weight of his presence became impossible to ignore. "You think that badge gives you the right to hurt people for no reason?" Keanu's voice cut through the air like a blade, his indignation and fury evident in every word. It wasn't just a question, it was an accusation, a searing condemnation of Kane's abuse of power. Kane, fueled by rage and desperate to reassert control, swung his baton wildly. But Keanu was ready. With a motion so swift it seemed impossible, he caught the baton mid-swing, his reflexes honed from years of discipline and training. The crowd gasped audibly as Keanu's hand closed around the weapon with ease, wrenching it from Kane's grip and tossing it aside. The clatter of the baton hitting the ground echoed like a punctuation mark to Kane's incompetence. Towering over the officer, Keanu's commanding presence was undeniable. His voice, steady and firm, carried an authority that left no room for doubt. "This is your warning," he growled, each word deliberate and final. "You don't want to take this any further." The crowd murmured in astonishment, their disbelief quickly morphing into cheers. Kane's humiliation was written across his face, but his anger only deepened. In a clumsy attempt to strike back, he lunged toward Keanu, but his untrained movements were no match. Keanu sidestepped effortlessly, his movements fluid and precise, and with a calculated sweep of his leg, he sent Kane tumbling face first into the grass. The onlookers erupted into applause, their collective voice rising in support of Keanu's actions. "That's what he gets!" someone shouted, a sentiment echoed by others as the energy in the park shifted from fear to vindication. Keanu, unfazed by the crowd's enthusiasm, kept his eyes on Kane. The officer scrambled to his feet, his uniform disheveled, his pride wounded, but his anger burning hotter than ever. Just as he made a move to charge again, the sound of heavy footsteps interrupted the scene. Two other officers approached quickly, their expressions a mix of alarm and disbelief. They stopped short, their eyes widening as they took in the sight before them. There was Kane, red-faced and panting, and Keanu towering calm and undeniably in control. Recognition dawned on one of the officers like a thunderclap. "Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" he blurted out, his voice tinged with awe. The second officer lowered his baton slightly, his jaw slack with disbelief. Kane, still seething, turned toward his colleagues, his frustration bubbling over as he realized the tables had completely turned. The absurdity of the moment was almost laughable, but the gravity of what had just occurred lingered, etched into the faces of everyone watching. "Who?" Kane barked, his voice loud but trembling, the bravado slipping as his eyes darted between his fellow officers and Keanu. Confusion and a dawning apprehension clouded his expression, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of the unfolding reality. The second officer stepped forward, his posture calm yet commanding, the stark contrast to Kane's blustering demeanor immediately apparent. "Mr. Reeves," he began, his voice respectful and tinged with a newfound caution, "are you all right? We had no idea you were here." The officer's words carried a tone of deference, his body language conveying a mixture of professionalism and awe as he addressed Keanu with care. Kane's face twisted into an expression of disbelief. "What?" he stammered, his voice cracking as he struggled to process the situation. "This guy is somebody important." His words were almost laughable, his ignorance laid bare for all to see. The smug confidence that had fueled his earlier actions was now replaced by a mix of panic and confusion as realizations slowly dawned. The second officer turned to Kane, his gaze burning with contempt. "Important?" he said, his voice a low growl of restrained fury. "He's one of the most respected figures in this country, a man admired by millions. And you—" He jabbed a finger toward Kane, his tone thick with scorn. "In your blind arrogance assaulted him." The weight of the rebuke hit Kane like a physical blow. His swagger vanished, replaced by visible panic as the full scope of his actions came into focus. I didn't know," Kane mumbled, his voice faltering as he scrambled to defend himself. He fidgeted, his hands trembling at his sides, searching for a way to claw back the ground he'd lost. Keanu, his expression steady and unyielding, stepped forward, his voice calm but cutting, sliced through the air. "You didn't care to know," he said, each word deliberate and precise. "You judged me on my appearance, on your assumptions, and you used that as an excuse to treat me like a criminal. That says far more about you than it does about me." The crowd, silent until now, buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Keanu's words landed with undeniable weight, his presence radiating an authority that silenced any doubt. The senior officer, who had watched the entire exchange, stepped forward. His voice rang out with sharp precision as he addressed Kane. "Officer Kane," he declared, his tone as cold as steel, "you are hereby placed under investigation for misconduct. Hand over your badge and gun. Now." Kane opened his mouth to protest, but the senior officer cut him off with a swift gesture. "Enough," he snapped. "We have witnesses. We have footage. Your actions were unacceptable, and this department will not tolerate them." Kane's shoulders slumped, his defiance extinguished by the undeniable authority of his superior. With trembling hands, he unpinned his badge and unholstered his weapon, passing them over without another word. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the park as Kane was led away by his fellow officers. Keanu turned to the gathering, his expression a mix of humility and determination. He raised a hand, signaling for quiet, and the noise gradually subsided. "Thank you for your support," he began, his voice rich with sincerity. His gaze swept over the crowd, his tone steady, yet charged with emotion. "This isn't about who I am," he continued, his words resonating with conviction. "It's about standing up to injustice. It's about refusing to tolerate mistreatment, discrimination, or abuse of power, no matter who it's aimed at. None of us, celebrity or not, deserve to be treated the way I was today." The crowd listened intently, their expressions reflecting a shared sense of purpose. "It's up to us," Keanu concluded, his voice rising with a note of hope. "All of us together to hold people accountable, to demand better, to create a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity." The applause that followed was thunderous, a collective affirmation of the values Keanu had so powerfully articulated. As he stepped back, his presence seemed to linger, a symbol of resilience and the fight for justice. Keanu's message, a clarion call for justice and respect, reverberated through the gathered crowd. His words, simple yet profound, ignited something deep within them, a shared determination to stand for what was right. The applause swelled, their cheers rising to a deafening crescendo, a collective roar of support and newfound courage. His presence, both commanding and reassuring, was a beacon of hope that stirred their hearts. As Keanu began to move through the throng, his steps deliberate and poised, a young boy darted forward, clutching a worn notebook tightly to his chest. His wide eyes sparkled with unfiltered admiration, his face glowing with the joy of meeting his hero. "Mr. Reeves, can I get your autograph?" he asked, his small voice trembling with excitement. Keanu paused, his sharp gaze softening as he turned toward the boy. A warm smile spread across his face, erasing the tension of the moment. Kneeling down, he became instantly approachable, his towering presence shifting into one of kindness. "Of course, buddy," he said, his tone gentle and genuine, putting the boy instantly at ease. "What's your name?" Keanu asked, his words filled with sincerity that bridged the gap between them. The boy's face lit up as he eagerly replied, and Keanu carefully inscribed a heartfelt message in the notebook. His pen moved with precision, crafting a keepsake that the boy would treasure forever. As Keanu handed the notebook back, the boy's mother stepped forward, her face a portrait of gratitude and admiration. Her eyes shimmered, and her voice, though steady, trembled slightly under the weight of emotion. "Thank you for what you did today," she began, her words infused with heartfelt sincerity. "It's not just about what my son witnessed, it's about all of us. You've reminded everyone here of what really matters: dignity, courage, and standing up for what's right." Keanu met her gaze with a gentle, knowing nod, his expression reflecting a humility that felt almost tangible. For a moment he seemed to absorb her words, the silence stretching between them filled with mutual understanding. Then he spoke, his voice calm yet resonant, each word carrying a quiet authority. "It's never just about standing up for yourself," he said, his tone rich with conviction. "It's about standing up for each other, for justice, for the truth, for the kind of world we all deserve to live in. That's our responsibility to one another." The weight of his words settled over the crowd like a warm blanket, their meaning sinking deep into the hearts of those gathered. Nearby, a father rested a hand on his son's shoulder, as if silently echoing Keanu's message. A teenager, phone still in hand, lowered it slowly, his eyes reflecting a newfound respect. Keanu straightened, his presence commanding yet unassuming, as the crowd continued to watch in reverent silence. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the park, highlighting the sharp lines of his silhouette as he turned to leave. His steps were purposeful, each one steady and deliberate, his figure radiating an inner strength that seemed to anchor the scene. Behind him, The crowd remained rooted in place, their earlier cheers now replaced by a deep and contemplative silence. It wasn't just admiration they felt, it was inspiration, a collective awakening sparked by the courage and integrity of one man who had refused to back down. As Keanu's figure grew smaller in the distance, the sun dipped lower on the horizon, its rays casting long shadows across the grass. A quiet reminder of the lasting impact one act of bravery can leave behind.